عن Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma قصة قال فيها فدنونا من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقبلنا يده رواه Abu Dawud. As we mentioned yesterday, sometimes Imam Nawawi rahimahullah brings a lengthy hadith or a section of what is a lengthy hadith in order to illustrate a point that is pertinent to the chapter that we are discussing. In this instance, what was pertinent is the latter part of the hadith or the incident that transpired with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, where the Sahabi Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma says, فَدَنَوْنَا مِنَ النَّبِيِّ sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We drew close to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. فَقَبَّلْنَا يَدَهُ. And we kissed the hand of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Kissing the hand or the forehead of a pious person or a spiritual elder, this is something that Islam regards as not only permissible but encouraged. However, the one caveat that we mentioned previously, where Rasulullah ﷺ was asked directly by a Sahabi that should I embrace someone and kiss him on his forehead, etc., Nabi ﷺ prohibited and said, do not do so. Ulama Ikram mentioned that an ahadith like this, wherein here we see the Sahabi embraced Rasulullah ﷺ or drew close to him and kissed Nabi ﷺ. On the one hand, Nabi ﷺ said, don't do this. Here it is being done and Nabi ﷺ does not prohibit it. The explanation that ulama ikram give is that this embracing and kissing is not something that you do all the time. If you're meeting somebody every day, their salam is sufficient. You don't have to go beyond that. However, as we can see from the initial part of this hadith, these Sahabah had returned from a journey. Now when you return from a journey or proceeding on a journey, you are greeting somebody who's pious, senior, etc. Make salam with that person, embrace that person, kiss that person. In that instance, there is no problem with it, and it is in fact something that Shariat will advocate. Now the incident that occurred prior to this, which is actually part of this lengthy hadith, Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma mentions an Abi Layla أن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما حدثه أنه كان في سرية من سرايا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال فحاس الناس حيسة فكنت ممن حاس فلما برزنا قلنا كيف نصنع وقد فررنا من الزاحف وبؤنا بالغضب. One important usul and principle we learned from this particular incident, and in it we see demonstrated before us what we call the mizaj and the temperament of Shariat. Many times you will witness something, you will hear about something, you will see something that is questionable. Somebody did something wrong, or somebody did something that it appears to be wrong, but it is possible to put a positive interpretation on it. In other words, person made a mistake, he did something wrong. We're talking about not wrong in dunya, wrong in Shariat, wrong in deen. Somebody committed some error, made some mistake. Should you condemn him? Should you point out his wrong to him? Should you scold him? Should you rebuke him? Or you have one other option. What is that option? Even though it's against what is apparent and what is in front of you, give whatever the wrong the person did a positive light, positive interpretation. Make a mistake and think that what he did was good. When you do that, particularly in an instance where somebody is repentant, he's sorry, he made a mistake. By you giving it a positive interpretation, this in fact translates his despair, his despondence into what we call himmat and courage. You are now giving him some himmat, some courage. You are encouraging him to go ahead rather than breaking his spirit. Unfortunately today, I've mentioned this many times, particularly in our Dini circles, there is a very, very acidic atmosphere and environment. In the name of the preservation of haqq, of the preservation of truth, many of us have morphed into this group that is ready to condemn, hit out on the slightest pretext where you could have given a positive interpretation. Sometimes the person didn't do anything wrong, but it could have been something wrong. There straight away we are ready to condemn, ready to hit out, ready to judge, ready to scold. And many of us think this is Shariat and Deen. We are upholding some flag of Islam, or we are some bastions of truth and some protectors of Shariat. The fact of the matter is that such an attitude, when we weigh it in the light of Seerah, and not one incident, many incidents in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi sallam, you will find that this was not the mizaj and temperament of Nabi Pak sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Coming back to this incident which illustrates this point, Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma mentioned that once we were in a group from amongst the groups that were sent out in the path of Allah by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He is referring here to a mission of jihad. Sahabah were part of a contingent that had been sent out to make jihad in the path of Allah ta'ala. Now on the battlefield, when a war takes place, there are certain things that the mujahid who is on the battlefield is not supposed to do. In other words, it is totally and completely prohibited. One of them we alluded to in one or two ahadith before this, when the Jews of Medina came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and they asked him, Antisi ayatim bayinat, what were the 9 kalimat, or the 9 signs of the Shariat of Musa alayhi salam that were shared in that Shariat and this Shariat. And there was a 10th thing which was specific to the Jews. Amongst those 9 things, if you will remember or recollect, one was firar min az-zahaf. La tuwallu, do not ever, on the battlefield, do not ever abandon your jamaat. In the face of defeat, don't turn around and run away. That is in Islam considered to be a major sin. And it was in the Shariat of Musa alayhi salam also. Don't ever do this. In our Shariat we are also told this is totally, completely prohibited. However, we are insan, we are human beings. Sahabah were human beings also. Sometimes the odds were so heavily stacked against them that they fell prey to human instinct. And what is human instinct? Dog suddenly attacks you, starts barking at you. What happens? Islam, there's such a thing what we call fright and flight. When a person becomes extremely afraid, he does first and thinks after. This is a survival instinct that Allah Ta'ala has naturally placed in human beings. We are programmed like that. For example, if suddenly we hear a bullet, we hear a bomb going off, or we hear a gun going off, immediate instinct first is to run. That is why we hear of people, stampedes occurring. Why? Because the people didn't think. They realized later that we made a mistake. Sometimes the exit is restricted, yet in hordes people are running. This is a natural instinct which occurs. If, depending on the caliber of the individual, when the reality dawns, when he realizes things have settled down, the panic is no more there. Allahu Akbar, I made such a big mistake. I shouldn't have done that. Now this is exactly what occurred. The odds on the battlefield became such that it reached a situation where Sahaba went in, or this group went into a panic. Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma describes it like this. He says, فَحَاسَ النَّاسُ حَيْسَةً فَكُنْتُ مِمَّنْ حَاسَ. The situation all of a sudden turned into a very, very dangerous situation. We panicked. So, hasa means to flee out of panic. said a group fled out of panic, and I was one amongst them. I was also amongst that group that fled out of panic. We made a mistake. We didn't realize it was instinctive. When we realized, فَلَمَّا بَرَزْنَا, when we realized what we had done, immediately we remonstrated with ourselves. كَيْفَ نَصْنَعْ وَقَدْ فَرَرْنَا مِنَ الزَّحَفِ. What did we do? We did firar min al-zahaf. We abandoned the battlefield. We ran away. وَبُؤْنَا بِالْغَضَبِ. We have earned the direct anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, they were totally and completely repentant, hurt, realized what a big mistake they did. And they didn't do it consciously. They did it, like I said, this is human instinct. Fright and flight, panic. And you react instinctively. Then once the thought process comes in, you realize that you made a mistake. So this is exactly what happened. So, what should we do? You and I, not everybody noticed. Not everybody noticed, so we'll come back quietly. Sahabah were not like that. Their integrity, their akhlaq, their character, they were of such a level. There was no question of making some sort of excuse now. So what did they do? They decided amongst themselves, لَدَخَلَ الْمَدِينَةِ, we will enter Medina Munawwara, and فَسَأَلَ مِنْهَا, we will ask Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam about this. فَلَا يَرَانَا أَحَدٍ. Nobody had seen us. Nobody had seen us. They made a mistake. However, they technically, in our language, they got away with it. They were not observed. But their akhlaq, their character, the pedigree of their conscience was such that without hesitation they presented themselves in Medina Munawwara, and they said to amongst themselves that لو عرضنا أنفسنا على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فإذا كانت لنا توبة أقمنا. We will present ourselves to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If there is tawbah for us, forgiveness for us, we will remain thereby. وَإِنْ كَانَ غَيْرُ ذَلِكَ ذَهَبْنَا. And if we are now tarnished, Allah's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is upset with us, He banishes us from Medina Munawwara, whatever is our fate, we will accept it. We will not hide the wrong that we did. However, this comes to the point that we were making. Somebody running from a battlefield, in Islam, we find that Islam distinguishes between what we call cowardice or a panic reaction and a strategic decision that is made for the greater good. Sometimes in a battle you retreat, not because you're abandoning the battlefield, you retreat in order to regroup and to mount a new attack upon the enemy. So that retreating to regroup is a strategic decision. Sometimes it's the intelligent thing to do. You catch the enemy off guard. Or it could have been a panic. So in other words, two possible interpretations could have been put. In this instance, the Sahabah are saying, Abdullah ibn Umar and those that did this are saying that we panicked and we fled. We didn't do it to regroup. But the option was there for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to choose this alternative, even though he knew it was not the reality. Yet Allah's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam demonstrated his extreme compassion and understanding by reframing their retreat as a necessary tactical maneuver rather than what it actually was. In other words, rather than a retreat. This teaching promotes resilience and courage to the believers, and from this, when you react like this, like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, then what happens is that the believers, they learn from their setbacks. Instead of succumbing to despair, the wisdom of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in guiding and comforting his followers while maintaining morale and unity, instead of labeling their action as sinful fleeing or cowardice, he described it as a regrouping, emphasizing that their retreat was strategic rather than cowardice. So, to complete that incident, Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma says that فَجَلَسْنَا لِرَسُولِ اللَّهِ sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We were sitting, waiting for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam before the Fajr Salah. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam came out at the time of Fajr to lead the Salah, we stood up. That part is now mentioned. We went close to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and we kissed his hand, which Allama Nawawi has mentioned because this chapter deals with musafaha, the kissing the hand of the forehead, etc., of a pious person. And we said, what did we say? Nahnul farun. Ya Rasulullah, we are that group that ran away. We committed a major sin. We did firar min al-zahaf. We are that group that ran away, abandoned our jamaat in the face of the enemies. In other words, we abandoned our jamaat and committed a major sin. Allah's Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Abdullah ibn Umar says that he came to us and he said, Bal antum karun. No. You are the ones who regrouped. You are not the ones who ran away out of cowardice. So in other words, what was a grave error was a positive interpretation was put upon it by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Thereby, instead of instilling despair, he instilled encouragement in them to strive further, rather than give in to this feeling of despair, give in to this feeling of sadness that had overtaken them. He gave them himmat and courage. And from this and other incidents like this, we learn this usul and principle, particular of spiritual elders or dini guides, that if there is some positive interpretation you can opt for the positive interpretation rather than shaming, naming, blaming, hitting out, accusing, etc. Because this is not part of the mizaj and temperament of Shariat. Like your Tawfiq.
Quran tells us no harm, no affliction, no virus, no earthquake, no test, no trial, no hardship can ever befall you illa ma kataballahu lana, unless Allah has decreed it.